Canadians are headed to the polls today in what has turned out to be an absolutely extraordinary election, which has a lot to do with our own president and his trade war and what's going on there. So to break it all down for us, very happy to be joined by David Dole, who is host of The Rational National. His YouTube channel is absolutely blowing up, and it's great to see you, David. Thanks for joining us.
Great to be here. Thanks.
Yeah, of course. So let's go ahead and throw this first element up on the screen that just shows the polling trends between the Conservative and Liberal Party here. You can see the Liberals really were down and out. And then suddenly Trump launches this insane trade war, and their fortunes changed significantly. So now they go into Election Day, at least somewhat, as the favorite here. Just break down for us the contours, who's running, what are the dynamics, what accounts for this dramatic shift?
Yeah, so the Liberals have been in power since 2015 under Trudeau's Liberals, overtaking a Conservative government at the time. Came in with a majority government, have been in power for 9 years. And then up until, a couple of years ago, polling really began to shift post-COVID due to the affordability crisis. And I think largely as well due to people just being tired of having the same people in power, seeing Trudeau every day. And then it got to a point where in December, it was like they were down and out. And Krystal Freeland, essentially Trudeau's second in command, decided to come out against him and resign from her post as there was about to be a cabinet shuffle, and she didn't want to change her position. So that was sort of the first thing to drop. And then after the new year, Trudeau decided to step down and have a leadership race. So there was a race between Krystal Freeland, Mark Carney, and a few others. Carney ended up winning that. And ever since, so it was a combination of both Trudeau stepping down and people being tired of him, as well as Trump and just the ongoing threats, the threats of annexation, the 51st state, Governor Trudeau, all this garbage. So that combination led to this dramatic shift, which, I'm reading analysis of the history of Canada and these sorts of elections. There has never been a shift like this quickly in our history.
And how much of this is the trade war and how much of this is Trump's 51st state barbs? Where at first you're like, haha, that's kind of funny, right? You're joking, right? This is this is a gag. And it's like, oh, wait, I'm not so sure this is a joke anymore. Like, so, because if you look at that polling collapse, it predates him even being sworn in. It dates back to him making all of his 51st state jabs. So what's been the response there? And if you had to weight the two things, the tariffs and the trade war and the 51st state stuff, which is kind of more significant, and obviously they blend together in some ways.
It's really more of the 51st state stuff, the annexation stuff. That like the trade war is an issue, but I don't think people are really necessarily feeling it right now. Essentially, there's been so much back and forth on the tariffs that it's hard to even know where things currently stand with that. But it's the threats for sure that where it was just like, even people that didn't like Trump already were sort of surprised, myself included. Like there wasn't a whole lot of talk of Canada in the U.S. election prior to Trump winning. Yes. And all of a sudden, I think there was a comment or two about potential tariffs, but there wasn't much about, 51st state, Governor Trudeau, any of this stuff. So that, I think, really led to this sort of defense mechanism in Canadians where there's all this national pride that we didn't know we had before that has come out, and we're sort of banding together and deciding that, no, we don't want this. And we want somebody in power who's going to be stable. Pierre Poilievre, the leader of the Conservative Party, for the past 2 years as he's been leader, he's been running essentially against Trudeau. And once Trudeau left, he was sort of left scrambling to try to apply his prior arguments against Mark Carney, who is a completely different person, isn't even currently an MP. And it's hard to make the same arguments against him when Trudeau and Carney are different leaders. So Pierre Poilievre's inability to really find a coherent message, in addition to the fact that he is far right in terms of Canada, has been endorsed by people like Elon Musk. So when you have those sorts of connections to a Trump administration that is so deeply disliked, it hasn't helped his case.
Yeah, I'm sure you get the Elon Musk endorsement at this point. You're like, thanks, question mark. To that point, I pulled a Carney ad and I pulled a Poilievre ad. Let's go ahead and start with the Poilievre ad. And what was notable about this is that he actually doesn't appear in it. So I want to get your reaction to that and the way that he has had to quickly scramble and reorient himself and his campaign. This is F3, guys. Go ahead and play it.
How's your son, David?
Well, it's been a tough few years for him. He just can't seem to get ahead.
Yeah, we had to pay for Sarah's down payment last year. Things are tough for her, too.
You know what Mark Carney says.
Come on, do you really think that a fourth Liberal term is going to change anything?
You know, I've been thinking the same thing.
Are we really going to give these clowns a fourth term? I'm voting Conservative. There you go.
Yeah, for a change.
Your reaction to that particular ad?
They have purposely taken Pierre Poilievre out of their ads. So this is, not often explored, but even while Trudeau was unpopular, even while the Liberals were really unpopular, if you look at Pierre Poilievre's actual numbers, just the approval of him and how people felt about him, he was not doing well. He was still underwater. So the lack of Liberal support before Carney came in was largely really due to the combination of the affordability crisis and people being tired of Trudeau. It wasn't because people loved Pierre Poilievre. So when that became even more clear during this election, essentially last couple weeks of the election, the Conservatives have put out 3 new ads, all of them not featuring Pierre Poilievre, either his face or his voice. So that's the one ad you saw there with the golfing. Another one is former Prime Minister Stephen Harper, saying, I worked with both Carney and Pierre Poilievre, and I support Pierre Poilievre, which of course he is. He's the former Prime Minister as a Conservative. So and then another one's, a few people discussing how terrible things are. But Pierre Poilievre is so unliked that they had to completely remove him from their advertising. And it's just like, it goes to how inauthentic Pierre Poilievre is. This is another element that people often, aren't attuned to, is just the fact that Mark Carney is oddly authentic. Even, he's a former governor of the Bank of Canada. He's a central banker, but he's authentic to that. He's not pretending to be anybody else.
He's an authentic, technocrat, liberal, banker.
He's running as a guy that led Canada through the 2008 financial crisis and then went to the UK to help the UK through Brexit. He's running as that guy, whereas Pierre Poilievre has a 20-year record in Parliament. He's been in Parliament for 20 years. 20-year record of fighting against the working class, fighting against labor. And now he's coming out to pretend he cares about the working class and he's going to make life more affordable. Like, where were you the past 20 years? Like, it comes off as so fake that people, even if they don't realize what Pierre Poilievre's record is, you can feel it in his speeches and the way he comes off, that he's not an authentic individual. Whereas Mark Carney is who he is.
Does golf code different in Canada? Like, I can't imagine a candidate who is trying to position themselves as pro-working class being like, you know where I need to go? The driving range.
Even Trump, who loves golf, wouldn't put that in his ad.
Yeah, it is odd. Like, I think that message there is that they're afraid of losing the older vote, which they are. What's kind of been surprising with this election is if you look at the breakdown by age, 65 plus is well in support of the Liberals. Like, it's not even really close. Whereas it's really under 35 where the Conservatives have a slight edge. And again, that's really, I think, due to the last 10 years of affordability and millennials and Gen Z really being hit by that and not really knowing where to put the blame there. But everybody over 35, big support for the Liberals. So the attempt there, I think, was really to connect to older voters who have kids who are struggling and people that, can relate to that and think that, we need change. But good change, or what sort of change are we talking about here? Because if we're looking at actual platforms, Mark Carney has I would argue, the best housing platform out of all of the parties, even to the NDP, which, have no chance at all of forming government. But Mark Carney has a plan to make or build 500,000 homes per year, essentially start a crown corp to overlook all of the building of the housing and doing it in a way where he is focusing on both affordability and prefab housing to essentially be able to build houses at a faster rate, also focusing on Canadian lumber and Canadian jobs. So there has been a real focus on investment from the Liberals, which I think benefits them in terms of the NDP vote, as the NDP, the floor has completely dropped out of the NDP, and a lot of those voters have moved to the Liberals, seeing as both a rejection of the Conservatives, but also supporting what Mark Carney is arguing. In addition to the fact that I think Mark Carney comes off as somebody who is a stable leader as opposed to, Pierre Poilievre.
And it's an interesting point because if a central banker told me that he's got a plan to build 500,000, houses a year, and he's going to do it, here's the labor supply, here's the wood supply, and here he's sketched it out, I'd be like, okay, actually, I trust you could actually probably pull that off. You're not trying to do something like that out of the ordinary here. It's like you're just building houses, and you should be able to do it. On the authenticity point, the funniest thing I think I saw in this race was Pierre Poilievre getting out and having a press conference right after Trump started going after USAID. I don't know if you remember this, he held a press conference saying that he was going to end all of Canada's foreign aid. And it's like, come on. The U.S. is barely doing anything when it comes to foreign aid relative to our spending. Canada, stop.
And now it's half. I guess he's cut that to now we're going to cut half of U.S. or half of aid, which is again, there's so many cues from Republicans that Pierre Poilievre has taken that have added up to the point where it hasn't benefited him. Like if nothing had changed in terms of the liberal leadership and Trudeau was still running, I think it's very likely you'd be looking at still a conservative majority, maybe at worst a conservative minority. But you have a situation where Pierre Poilievre has spent years aligning himself to MAGA, and now the chickens are coming home to roost, and you have a situation where people really do not want Trump-style politics in Canada, and he's the face of it. So it's not worked out well for him.
Yeah, I would have to think at this point, with the trade war being so important too, the fact that he's a central banker and has some deep understanding of the bond markets and their impact is a affirmative benefit for him as well. But I mean, how do you handicap the race, David? I saw the polls have tightened some coming down the stretch, giving conservatives some hope that they may be able to prevail. What do you think is going to play out, or what are the odds of what's going to play out?
Based on everything I'm reading, it's really appearing to be a liberal majority, at worst a liberal minority. And it's important to note that even if the conservatives had a slight lead in the overall vote in polling, they still likely would not be able to win a minority government, just the way that the seats play out and how the conservative vote tends to be concentrated. So the cons would really need, several point advantage in polls to be able to be in a situation where they're going to form government, and they're just not anywhere near that right now. Now, of course, we've seen polling be a little off in the past, but Canadian polling tends to be fairly accurate. So I'm really, it'll be curious to see how it holds up this time. As you could argue maybe there's sort of this hidden conservative vote that we've seen in the U.S., and maybe that's going to come out, this time in Canada. But the way things look right now, liberals should be pretty confident that they're going to be able to form government.
And let's finish with a Mark Carney ad to see, kind of what his message is. Let's roll that here.
No, people are anxious right now. President Trump has created a crisis.
Key news from Wall Street.
Investors react to the sweeping tariffs.
Well, I've led people through crises my entire career. I've worked with prime ministers from both parties to solve big problems for Canadians. And right now, we're facing the biggest crisis of our lifetimes. And we need serious leadership and a real plan.
Is that pretty representative of what his approach has been throughout this short campaign?
Yeah, stability, leadership, and he's been benefited as well by people like Premier Doug Ford in Ontario, who is a conservative. I mean, he's the head of the Progressive Conservatives. I know that's a confusing term for Americans to hear, but he is a conservative, and countless scandals. I've done many videos about how terrible Doug Ford is, but he's somebody who is able to read the room. Yeah. And has been very forward in being very, against Trump. Has been on all, U.S. networks discussing.
We've played some of him here. Yeah.
Yeah, his approach. So, and he has not endorsed Poilievre. He's kind of stayed out of the race. He's somebody who, him and Poilievre don't really have much of a relationship. So the fact that Ontario is so important in the election, and he doesn't have the support of Doug Ford in any capacity, I think has hurt him as well.
Interesting. All right, David Dole, everybody go subscribe to David's channel, and I'm sure you'll be covering whatever happens with the Canadian elections today. So thanks so much for breaking it all down for us.
Hey, if you like that video, hit the like button or leave a comment below. It really helps get the show to more people.
And if you'd like to get the full show ad-free and in your inbox every morning, you can sign up at breakingpoints.com.
That's right. Get the full show, help support the future of independent media at breakingpoints.com.